Second of all, the soil lab is Wednesday and Thursday. I should warn you that the pre-lab for this week's block is kind of nar-nar. The pre-lab for this week's block needs really specific materials and directions for like 3 separate experiments you're going to do. So make sure that you have all those details really clearly laid out. You won't be allowed to use your handout. You are allowed to cut out the soil triangle if you want to glue that on. And you may want to prepare to collect data. So I would recommend a data table in your pre-lab. Also remember that part of your pre-lab is to have 2 cups of soil. Okay. Have any questions about that pre-lab? Before we discuss the modern global food system, 2 quick announcements. One of them, I run an aquaponics project on campus. We've been like building a system for it. The system's mostly built. And we've been raising fish off campus. We had them on campus, then we moved them off, and they're going to come back when we finish building our system here. It's been a student-run project all along, so I just help them coordinate on Wednesdays, and like I work 2 afternoons to help out, but it's basically all kids. Wyatt Mayfus, Dane Holroyd, Gabe Spear, Colton Ingram, sometimes Colton Ingram. Peter Beeson worked on it a little bit last year. And who am I forgetting this year? Anybody know who I'm forgetting? Colton, Dane, Wyatt, one more. Anyway, I'm sorry to be a jerk. I'm forgetting someone. Oh yeah, Eli Lux. Anyway, they're seniors now. And so in the next few months, they kind of need to transition out and hand this over to kids that are pumped. Aquaponics is a way to grow fish and plants at the same time. So you feed the fish some scrap foods. The fish grow based on that food and then poo into the water, and that water becomes fertilizer to grow plants. So it's really not a great way to just grow fish. It's not a really great way to just grow plants, but if you're already doing one, it's kind of a cheap way to help do the other one. And we have like a couple of demonstration systems that we're going to install at the high school so that next year when we have a new facility, we'll have some like aquaponic projects going. And we're going to recruit new juniors now. For students that are curious, it's basically a volunteer effort. So you put in some time, but it's a student project that you could write about in a letter or whatever. It's kind of neat, sciencey food production, dorkiness with fish, playing, living stuff. There's a lot of directions we can go depending on how many students want to join. You should know that I kind of help you process information you find, and I help you plan work you do, but it's a student project. And if anybody's interested, we have a meeting this Wednesday at lunch here, if anybody wants to take over the aquaponics project from the boys who had it so far. Questions about that one? The other announcement is for the seminar. If you are currently enrolled in my seminar, but want to move out, you can talk to your counselor or you can sign up for someone else's seminar. If you want to be added to my seminar, which is basically just study hall, with an emphasis on APES tutoring if you need my help on APES, you would sign up here. Does anybody want to join my seminar? Didn't you leave my seminar?
Yeah, they moved me up for some weird reason.
Oh, but that wasn't you?
No, that wasn't me. Remember I told you?
I forget. Okay, are we done with the announcements? Then please take out your 4.1. Please take out your 4.1. Yeah. Which one?
The Arroyo Hondo.
What?
The Arroyo Hondo one.
Bingo, excellent, yeah, perfect, thank you. I think somebody turned in the written part without a photo and then turned in the photo separately. So I don't remember one of those. And I think somebody didn't have the function. I think it's in unit 2 though. Wait, was that in unit 3 the Arroyo Hondo?
Yeah.
It was the, check the date, and based on the date I can tell you.
Wait, it was like, when are the pictures and paper due?
Exam date. You can turn them in late too. But if you want to get credit with everybody else, the report card on exam day. If you tell me the date, I can tell you the.
I think it's October 3rd, or at least one of them has a date.
October 3rd is not the date.
Okay, I don't know.
Check another. Oh wait, October 3rd is definitely the date. Unit 3 for sure. So that would be Green Club activity. So that goes in unit 3 after the 2. Thank you. There's like 2 clumps of content in the assignment 4.1. The globalization of food and the modernization of food production. So I want to discuss those 2 parts as like 2 separate stories. Each of those stories then breaks up into all the study goals that have the little details. But if you have them as 2 big stories, it's actually pretty mellow. Before we get started, I want to get the vocab out of the way. In assignment 4.1, are there any vocab questions? Yeah?
Genetically modified organisms and genetically modified crop.
Often used interchangeably. A modified crop is a type of modified organism. So you can modify an animal, you can modify a bacterium, or you can modify something that you grow for food, which is a crop. So genetically modified organisms, genetically modified crops. And a lot of my students kind of confuse things. Selective breeding, crop development, hybrids, cross-pollination, none of that is genetic modification. Genetic modification is literally tweaking the DNA of a single cell to grow an entire organism which is unique. Man-made genetics. That is completely different from selective breeding. Salmon and strawberries cannot be bred together. There is no way to selectively breed a tomato with a beetle. But there are actually ways to genetically pull a gene, scientifically pull out a gene from a beetle and then insert it into a tomato and make a genetically modified tomato. A genetically modified organism is one whose genetics were designed by humans, usually just a small part.
Is that mostly called like good than dogs or why would they?
Well, there's a bunch of reasons you might want to do this. Most of these are ways to make plants more productive. Either prevent disease, prevent bugs, make them faster growing, change their nutritional value. There's some pretty amazing genetic modifications on the horizon. People are talking about plants that make medicines, bacteria that fart out diesel or gasoline or natural gas, animals that grow human body parts for transplant. Some of this stuff is actually like really interesting and sounds like pretty cool science. There's also a lot of debate about unintended consequences. So we'll get to that in another study goal, but this was just the vocab part.
How many in genetically modified organisms, how many genes can we, as of right now, put in and like make or alter? Like, because it sounds like pretty much controlled. You only do like one or two. Can you pretty much recreate something yet, or?
Okay, hold on. There's two separate questions in your question that I want to show you. One question is, how much can we play with genes? And the answer is pretty freaking endless, bro. You can pretty much identify an individual gene within a year for any trait you want to find. So if we don't already know what it is, we have the mechanisms to find the gene for almost anything which has a genetic foundation. So if you can demonstrate that something is a genetic trait, we can pretty much get the gene. I know how to do some of that. Like I can almost on my own pull that off. Because I did some genetic stuff when I was in college.
If you had the right.
Yeah, I mean, it takes like a humongous lab and a bunch of nerds, but yeah, I kind of know how, restriction enzymes, and I can pretty much cut out a gene. Once you've got that gene, what are you going to do with it? We basically have the tools to take a strand of DNA, cut it, and insert a gene. Pretty much, the mechanics of moving genes into and out of DNA is pretty, that part's straightforward. Getting that to be a viable commercial product from there is 40 gazillion specialists with decades of development. So making that DNA into a viable embryo that will grow and express that DNA, I don't know how many of those we have, but the number's a lot less than infinity.
Why?
And then going from that to something which you can replicate, and it'll actually grow in the field and be like a normal tomato that has antifreeze in it. There's a lot of really common modifications. So like 75% of your packaged foods include one GMO product or more. If you eat something that came in a wrapper, chances are better than 50-50 that it has a genetically modified ingredient. But almost all of those are just a few really common modifications. Yeah.
How do you get something like once you have an embryo, or you get it in there to become an embryo? How does it grow?
Voodoo. Yeah. So this is the part where like the viability to scale it into production is kind of the bigger challenge.
Because like do you need like surrogate type like parenting thing to be able to go out and have.
So
a
for
kid,
animals,
or-
once you've created the surrogate giving birth to the genetically modified bloodline, then you have to breed that to another one that keeps the genetically modified bloodline. And then you have like a bloodline that you grow in size until you have a critical mass of organisms. So yeah, there's a lot of test tube babies until you get the right number. In plants, it's kind of a similar concept. Okay, who else? Other vocab. Other vocab? No other vocab? Does anybody know what a synergistic effect is? That was one of your vocab, so. Yeah,
The combined effect of two or more things that make a greater effect than if they were separated.
yeah. So I'll give you an example. Smoking cigarettes and being exposed to asbestos. Smoking cigarettes is bad for you. I'm going to make up a number. 1 in 10 smokers dies. That's a made-up number. And asbestos exposure is bad for you. 1 in 10 people exposed to asbestos dies, and that's also a made-up number. So 1 in 10 smokers, 1 in 10 asbestos exposure. What if you are a smoker exposed to asbestos? Is your chance of dying 2 in 10? No, because of the synergy between those things, it's actually 7 in 10. Smoking is bad on its own. Asbestos exposure is bad on its own. When you're exposed to both of those risk factors, they might have a special combination that is especially bad. Does that make sense to everybody? That's called a synergistic effect. And in the news recently, an athlete made an example for you so that we can have a conversation which is contextualized in current events. We owe this man a great debt of gratitude. Anybody know who I'm talking about? Lamar Odom, who was hosing the Coke and then popping the Herbo Viagra, which is basically black market Viagra dyed a different color. And it says right on the bottle, I wouldn't know or anything, of Viagra, don't take with stimulants. Because when you have raised the flag, you wouldn't want to increase your blood pressure and God knows what could explode. And apparently, homeboy passed out, coma,
He had a
seizure,
aneurysm,
aneurysm,
no.
stroke.
Strokes.
Damn. Well, we all know that cocaine is perfectly good for you, and Viagra is perfectly good for you. But in combination, unexpected consequences, those are what we call synergistic effects.
Because they both have an effect on the same thing, like asbestos and smoking both affects your lungs.
That's a good hint, salud. That's a good hint for synergies. They're both something to do with respiration. And so my hunch is the Viagra and the cocaine both have some sort of a dilation issue. Something about blood vessels, I would think. Something about circulatory system, blood pressure, something like that, right? People on coke get kind of flushed, right? Maybe something about oxygen supply to the brain or something, I don't know. So those of you who are medicated, you know that your doctors always ask you, well, what other medications are you taking? Because in medicine, there's the intended consequences of your medicine and then the unintended consequences when you combine them. How many of you have heard that there are these combinations of medicines you should avoid? Those are synergies. One plus the other, synergistic. Okay. Anybody else more vocabularies? Yes?
Marasmus.
Kwashiorkor. Oh, sweet. Fire alarm. Wow. Will you please pause that for me?